Thursday, everybody. Welcome once again to everybody's favorite day of the week. Day 4 with Frank Scalish, along with Matt, who is in Tulsa. Frank, how you doing, man?
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. All right.
Busy.
All right.
Very busy.
All right. Matt, how you doing?
I got caught eating a gluten-free macaroon.
The problem isn't that you're eating a macaroon. The problem is it's gluten-free.
I know, but I can't help it. Girlfriend's got celiac disease, so I've had to learn how to navigate this gluten-free world.
Good
I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it's like only having a Carolina rig in the boat, but at least you're fishing. At least you're fishing.
Man.
Yeah. Gluten-free is the Carolina rig of food.
You got to go watch my Carolina rig show on LureNet YouTube, and you will change your tune,
Okay.
so to speak.
All right, good stuff.
It's been a week or two, so.
Yeah.
I like you got the Uncle Frank shirt on today.
I do. In fact, good notice, even though you can't see the back.
Yeah.
But, but you can see that.
We'll do a gray one with your face on the front next round.
Hey, Matt, check this out, dude. We might want to put this on the front. Look at this. That right there.
What is that look? With the tape measure?
How about that?
That look combined with the tape measure usually doesn't involve a fish, Uncle Frank.
I just need to explain something to you guys. I think I was 14. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe younger. That was like in 1976. I mean, I'm sure that is an antique photo by now. And I didn't. Sweater vests weren't a thing yet, so
No,
I had to go for the faux collar double shirt look. Oh my God! Look at that! What a young dude.
March 27th, 1976.
Holy crud!
So where is that at? Where are you holding that fish up? Do you remember?
Yeah, in my mom's kitchen.
Oh my gosh, Frank.
Yeah, dude, I was a young kid. I ate that guy. I ate him good.
Okay, so we've got that piece. And before we go to the next one, let's do this. Let's talk about what you're going to talk about today, Frank.
Yeah, this show today is going to be very important for all anglers out there. I have been getting bombarded. I talk a lot about grass lakes and stuff, and I have been getting bombarded with structure fishing on lakes that don't have grass. So I am going to show you exactly what to look for when you're structure fishing, so you can look on a map on your Navionics or your Lake Masters map and literally pick spots out just off the map. It's going to help eliminate tons of time for you guys, and it's going to put you in some higher percentage areas. I'm not going to get into too much detail on how to fish these spots. I'm going to get more detailed in how to find them and what to look for. I've been getting literally gobs and gobs of DMs on this, and I need to address it because, sometimes I take things for granted because I know what I'm thinking or I know what I'm going to say, and I leave something out or I just assume something. And so I want to just do a quick overview on this because I think it's really important.
All right, cool stuff. And we've got maps we're going to throw up there.
Yeah.
You're going to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into that.
Okay, wait. And here's what I did. I've got like 10 or 11 sections of maps. And basically I took sections of lakes all across the United States because I wanted to find different things for different reasons. And so you'll see it when it happens. You'll see it.
All right. Now, I'm going to throw up another picture, and this one was actually sent to me by a viewer.
Oh,
Check this out. Let's see
no.
here. Look at this. What is up with that?
What the heck were you guys getting all this?
Oh my gosh, a giant carp in the orange insulated jumpsuit.
Hey,
you play saxophone in like an 80s R&B group?
yeah, I was in Journey. So yeah,
Oh,
so
my
okay, so
gosh.
just so you guys know, be, before I was before I was Uncle Frank, I was really my cousin Vinny.
Oh, my gosh. Frank,
Oh
what?
my
Explain this
I feel
photo.
like
What's
there's a lot
going
of
on?
oil in that hair.
There's no
Like,
product.
there's no product at all?
Dude, that's what happens when you have good hair when you're young. When it gets even with you when you get older.
Oh, my
So
gosh.
so here's the deal. I have a super tight friend of mine. We are like family. We've known each other since birth, and his name is Troy Armstrong, and so he had gotten relocated to Charlotte. So back in the day, I used to run to Charlotte all the time and fish on Lake Norman and by him, and then he would come up here and fish Lake Erie and stuff with me. So there's a hot water discharge, and back in the day, salmon and steelhead, walleye, smallmouth, everything would run into these discharges, in November, December, and January and February. So I had gone in there and I was literally catching salmon. I was catching them on actually crankbaits, and of all things, I was catching them on a Rebel craw. And so at any rate, so I called him up and I said, you got to get up here. The salmon are in, and I got a surprise. And he's like, what's the surprise? I said, you'll see when you get up here. So anyway, so I had mixed this. We used to make fish formula when we were younger, mineral oil, a dram of anise oil, a couple of drams of blackberry juice. It was like a big thing in Ohio. Everybody did it. Well, I had found that the carp love this stuff. So I would just put on a white grub, throw it up against the retaining wall, let it bounce down the current, just like if you were fishing in a river, let it bounce down the current, and these gigantic carp would slaughter these things. And so you could literally go in there and have a fish on every minute of the entire day. And so we would go in there and wear these big slobs out. And so that's
Wow.
it came about.
Hey, what kind of trolling motor is that?
That is
What
an
is
old
it?
Johnson.
Really?
Yeah, I mean an old Evinrude trolling motor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was on my Champion. Back then I think it was a 16.8.
Oh, geez. Hey, a lot of people want to know if there's numbers on the back of that jumpsuit.
Allegedly. Hey, that is what I used to wear. That is what I used to wear deer hunting because I trust no one.
Oh, geez. Man, that's awesome. Many thanks to the
Troy.
gentleman that sent that one in.
Troy,
That's great stuff.
I'm nervous. If he starts going through his photo bank, there's going to be photos I cannot explain. I hope that's the last one.
Man, I hope you didn't eat that one. You didn't eat that one, did you?
No,
Oh,
gosh, no.
All right.
But we would catch them. We would catch them literally. When I tell you we would catch them nonstop the entire day, I am not kidding. So I brought my son Frankie in there one time when he was a little kid, like probably 9 or 10. And he's like, Dad, I want to catch them on. I said, okay. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in there and you're going to catch the biggest fish of your life. They're going to be as long as you are. So we go in there and I pitch a grub up there, bounce it down, whack, I get him. I hand him the rod. I take his rod from him. I'm letting him fight that fish, and you're not reeling them in. They're just doing whatever they want. So he's fighting it. Right when it starts to get where it's laying on the top, and I know I can grab him or net him, I cast out the other one, whack, I hand him the rod. I take the one that he just fought the fish. I did that probably 10 times in a row. That kid fought a fish for like 35 minutes. And when it was that half hour of nonstop fighting these big pigs was over, he just goes, let me just catch one myself.
That is awesome. That is
great.
good stuff there. All right, so many thanks for sending those photos our way. All right, Frank, jump right into it, man.
Okay, so here's. Oh, you know what? shout out. I got to do a shout out.
All right.
DJ McEachern and his wife just completed their masters in chemistry, and they're working on their PhDs. They got married in May, and as all fishermen know, you have to go fishing on your honeymoon. And he wound up catching his personal best smallie, which was over 6 pounds, on his honeymoon with his wife. Way to go, guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a cool thing.
Yeah, so now I think, because I got that message too, that they are working on both of them on their PhDs now. And
Correct.
They got a little bit more time, and they want to jump back into the game and do a little bit more fishing.
Perfect.
But many thanks to them for being fans of Frank Scalish, Day 4, and BTL. But
Absolutely.
Hey, man, I went fishing on my honeymoon.
I did too.
Yeah, I was in Orlando.
Outstanding. Would you do intercoastal or ocean?
No, I went Toho.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I was at St. Croix, and I went deep sea fishing, and after a 3-hour boat ride out, I was on the floor of the boat, puking my guts out.
Wow.
Oh, I couldn't even stand up. I couldn't stand up. Yeah, I spent 4 hours literally wishing I was dead.
It's not fun, man. It is.
No.
Seasickness is one of the worst things that you can have, especially when you're trying to fish and you can't.
Well, yeah,
fish
you know,
it sucks. It's horrible.
And I'm paying the captain a ton of money, and all he did was mock me all day. I said, "Look, dude, I don't care what's going on in my world. If we hook up on a billfish, you get me in that fighting chair and put that rod in my hand, and I don't care how many guys it takes to lift me off the floor, but I am fighting that fish." And the only thing I fought was dry heaves.
Yeah. Not good. Anyway, man, folks, keep the feedback coming. You can head to Frank's Instagram, and feel free to email Matt or myself, matt@basshome.com, mark@basshome.com, and love the comments, man.
Yeah, me too. And my Instagram, Scalish_fishing. And hey, keep the boyo photos coming. Some of them are pretty funny. I like it. Keep them coming,
a couple,
guys.
Man, they're pretty good.
September 9th is going to be here before you know it, and then it's too late.
Yeah, they're pretty creative.
Yeah, they're funny. I love you guys. You guys are so funny, man.
It's quite creative. All right, man. Let's talk a little bit about the topic of the day.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to break down on pure structure lakes. I'm going to show you elements to look for and very high percentage places. Okay, these are places that are more likely than not going to put extra fish in your boat or help you become better on these pure structure lakes. So I'm going to start with what I consider the easiest thing to look for. Now remember, this is summertime fishing. This is offshore stuff, except for the first two maps I'm going to show you. They could lend themselves in the winter time as well, and in the early spring as well. So other than that, everything else is going to be mostly offshore summertime, after the spawn and before the late fall migration. Okay, so let's throw and see. I have them all here too. I have all the maps here too. So let's throw up map A.
All right, real quick, for those people that are listening to the replay on any of the podcast platforms such as iTunes or Google Podcasts or whatever, you're going to get some good info, but this might be one of those shows that you definitely want to go back and look at what Frank is talking about on these maps through the visual that Frank is going to describe when I throw up the maps on this video.
Right, and I'll try to be descriptive enough where the guys listening can get a pretty good idea.
All right, so this is map A.
Map A. Now this is what I call, this is a bluff. Okay, if you see the two arrows, that's the current, and then if you see the yellow lines on the map, those are the high percentage places on the bluff. So what I have on the far left is a bluff end that makes a point. What I have on the far right is the same thing, another bluff end that makes a point. Bluff ends or beginnings, however you want to call them, are very, very high percentage places on bluffs, because that is where the bluff starts to change its makeup. So instead of it being super steep and sharp break, it starts to peter out. So what you have on these ends is you'll have debris piles that pile up there because the current pushes it in there and stuff like that. Those are very high percentage places. The two lines in the middle of the bluff, okay, are where the bluff breaks. I call them guts. They're little cave-ins on the bluff. Anytime you have a cave-in on a bluff, that's a super high percentage place, because debris gets trapped in those little divots and piles up down there. So it becomes different than the rest of the bluff. So if you see on this particular map here, you're looking for differences on the bluffs. A pure straight wall is just a pure straight wall. Okay, you have to find the differences on those bluffs. Now there's a sneaky spot over here. It's directly across from the bluff. It's a 20-foot high spot right at the channel bend. If you notice that, there's some super steep contours on the right side of the high spot, and it forms a little hook finger. That could be a very high, very potentially hot spot over there as well, depending on what the bottom makeup is. As long as it's not mud and it's a hard bottom area, that could be another sleeper spot. Again, that's bluff ends and guts and ditches in the bluff. So if we go to B, slide B, map B. Yeah, I'm with you, dude. I'm right here, man. I'm not going anywhere.
Right,
I have it.
Map B. All right, there we go.
Okay, so this is another bluff. This bluff cuts out into a steep pocket mouth. And if you notice on the down current side of that bluff, the mouth of the pocket, there's a secondary finger that shoots out into the lake in between the two hash marks at the end of that bluff. That is a super, super high percentage spot, because now what I have is I have a slow tapering point, slower than the bluff comes out, but I also have a shelf that comes out to the main river channel now. And that's a real high percentage spot on both sides, the down current side and the up current side of it. You have to fish both sides, because if you have smallmouth bass in the body of water that you're fishing, if they're actively feeding, a lot of times they go on the up current side of this stuff. If they're not actively feeding, they'll slide off on the lee side of it, where they get the current break. And then again, just to reiterate a point, you have two little cave-in spots on this bluff. And so I put the yellow marks on the cave-in spots. Again, very high percentage places. One thing about bluffs, bluffs are not a Carolina rig spot, just to, keep Matt happy. It's not a Carolina rig spot. I prefer football jigs, heavy finesse flipping jigs, ball style head. Football jigs and ball style heavy jigs have a tendency to come through the rocks better. It's too steep for a Carolina rig. You could parallel this with a crankbait, but for the most part, you can even flick shake these and Ned rig bluffs, because you'll get a slow fall on your bait, and you could feather it down the bluff ledges where some parts of the bluff stick out and stuff like that. So that's just a few things on the bluffs. That's the easiest stuff to find on any structure lake is the bluffs. Super easy. You just got to determine which bluffs have the most fish potential, and now you know exactly what to look for. Bluff ends, bluff guts, cave-ins on the bluff. You could see a lot of it physically with your eyes. You could side scan it too, and you could find stuff side scanning. It's real easy to fish, easy to find. Really good stuff to look for.
All righty. What's next?
All right. I think next we're on slide C.
Okay.
Okay. This is main lake points. And what I like to look for on these areas, if you go to the lower left portion of that point, you'll see the hook in there, the swing. So I'll start out on the lower left side and I'll fish the swing. I have 2 yellow dots on the end of the point, okay, being the high percentage spot, in my opinion, on this particular area would be the swing. But where the 2 yellow dots are, it starts to flatten out. That could also be a potential, okay? As I move down that point, you see how there's 3-4 contour lines where the 3 dots are. 3 contour lines that spread way out. Okay, that creates an underwater flat. Okay, those are massive fish holding areas, especially if you can find debris on them in the form of brush piles, stumps, or boulders, big boulders. Very high percentage spot. If we peter on down the break past the super high spot, you'll see I got 2 yellow dots by the line. Again, no, up the stream.
Up here.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
there you go.
All
so
right.
now you're seeing another flat thing occurring, but if you notice at the end of that flat, it drops down distinctly off of that flat part. So you have like an underwater point, then a big flat, and then a super steep break into the basin area. That's a really good main lake point. To me, that point right there has so much fish potential, I can't stand it. Now, I'm not going to talk about the submerged bridge pilings and stuff like on the top of the map, because that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about main lake points. But that's what I would look for. This is an outstanding crankbait Carolina rig spot. DD22s, fat-free 7s, Carolina rigs, football jigs. This is a classic piece of structure right here.
Hey, Frank, can I point something out and ask you a question at the same time?
100%.
On this map, for a lot of people out there are a lot of what I would classify as obvious spots. All right?
That is correct.
Obvious areas. What we're keying on here and what you're describing is not necessarily the obvious spots. Yeah, it might be to you, but for people that are really trying to educate themselves and identify stuff utilizing this technology, you need to look for something that is not the obvious, because for the most part, people are going to be fishing the obvious. True or not true?
Well, it's very true. Now, here, look, I'm going to show you something on this very map right here. That point there is, in my opinion, insanely obvious. It has every single element that I want. Okay, the unobvious spot would be on the lower left, the inside swing.
Yeah,
that's unobvious. Now, if you go across the lake, like the roadbed goes across the lake, you're going to see it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Stop. Now come down. Right there. That's an unobvious spot. That's a point that doesn't look like a point on the map, on the land, but underwater it makes a point. Now, it's a little bit shallow. It has a steep break, but that could be a fish potential spot as well. That is probably a super unobvious spot. Okay. So that's kind of what you're looking at. Now, another unobvious spot is on the lower right corner of this map. The lower right, there's a 19-foot high spot right next to the 22 mark where your arrow is. There it is, right there.
Yeah.
I would idle over that to check it, because the map says 19 feet, and I would almost bet my life on it that it's higher than 19 feet. Okay. The other unobvious spot would be the finger that's above it that sticks out. Go straight up from where you're at.
Right there.
Up, keep going up.
Here.
Right there.
Yeah.
That needs to be looked at. It could be nothing, but it could be something. Those are unobvious. Those are really, really unobvious spots.
Okay.
I'm focusing on I'm focusing on stuff right now to help you guys narrow your search down at a glance of your map. The unobvious stuff you can look at once you understand more obvious structure. The unobvious will start to stand out for you, because yes, it's not a great, some of that unobvious stuff is not a great detail on your map. However, it can be great. That's how I find a lot of obscure stuff when I'm offshore fishing.
Very nice.
So if we get, now that map there we showed was a standard, what I consider a legitimate underwater point. Okay. Now there's another point on the next map that we got to address. Map D.
All right. This
will be high spots at the ends of main lake points. This will be structural elements that occur after the point ends. So my first yellow line on the tip of that point and on the inside swing. Now I would fish both sides of this point, not just the side I highlighted. I would fish both, especially if I got bit. But the side I highlighted has a roadbed on it. So I wanted to concentrate on that one first. The really high percentage spot here is the bump off the end of the point. That's the money spot right there. Yeah. Okay. Now there's another bump even deeper. So judging by the topography of this lake probably will have fish in the 38 to 40 foot range at times. So that outside bump that pops up at 41 feet, that could be a sleeper spot out there. But there is so much going on between the deep hump and the shallower high spot that this spot here stands out to me like a sore thumb. You know, the underwater point all the way down at the bottom of the page is pretty flat and mundane for as deep as it is.
Right so here.
Where is your arrow at?
Hang on, right here.
Yeah, right there. That's pretty flat and mundane. So I wouldn't even probably look at that, because the other stuff is such a high percentage place. And I always go out on points to find if there's high spots off the ends of them. Sometimes I find these high spots so far off the point, most guys would never even look for them there. So you want to explore. Now, keep this in mind, guys. I picked these spots out on these maps to best illustrate my point. There's going to be other, you're going to look at lakes by you, and all these lakes are, first off, all these lakes are different lakes, and they're all over the country. So I picked out the best structural elements that I could find that would illustrate in the easiest possible way for you guys to see what I'm talking about. And then now this is a cool, let's go to and if you guys have questions, fire them in, because I can answer questions as I go, so I don't get too far ahead of myself here. But just keep in mind that these are randomly chosen lakes. Some of the stuff I actually do fish, but most of the lakes were randomly chosen. But there is a few things that I'm showing you that I actually fish. So on these lakes. So if we go to slide E, then this slide here will be a representation of several things, but mainly I picked this slide for offshore humps and offshore high spots. Even though on this particular map here, we have a whole lot of things going on in this area of the main lake. This area right here, to me, has so much fish potential because there's so many different elements happening here. So right now I'm going to address the two main lake humps on the upper part of the map.
Up here.
Yes, okay. Those two. Okay, the one on the right is not connected to anything. Okay, that's a standalone. even though there's a short saddle between that and the mainland, this is really kind of standalone-ish. I like standalone spots in the summer because the fish will gravitate out to these places depending on how deep the bait fish is that you see. They'll use the top of these high spots for ambush points when the bait comes across the top of them. Okay. The one to the left of it is a little bit more connected to the mainland. That spot right there would be my early summer stop. And it could be in the middle of summer too, but that's a really good spot early summer because here it's got a 7-foot high spot on it. So those fish coming off the spawn in all those pockets that are around this place will slide out on that stuff first. They'll also slide on that particular spot first in the pre-spawn, or not, well, before pre-spawn, early spring. They'll slide on that spot first. Anywhere you see yellow dots, that's to illustrate a high percentage spot or something different on that structural element. Okay. On the hump we're talking about here, the one on the left, the spot on this place I like the best is right above that buoy where it hooks out and flattens out a little bit. So I would fish from the 7-foot stuff all the way down through that flat. The tricky spots on here is the 2 dots, the inside swing of the main lake point, and then the obvious point just below that, and then all the way to your right, the obvious point to your right. Because see how it's got that big flat tabletop on it in the upper right corner? It's got that big flat tabletop. That flat area can hold a lot of fish. They'll slide up there to feed, and they'll slide back down where the inside turn is on that, or the deepest yellow dot I got marked. They'll slide down there and hold when they're not actively feeding. So that's a good area. The point in the middle of your screen is exactly what we talked about earlier. It's a high spot off the end of a point. And you can see how the structural element moves and hooks up to the left, to the upper left of that point. That's a really good high percentage area. This section in this map right here, I would fish that very carefully because there's going to be a pile of fish somewhere within those structural elements. This is a spot that if I was running down the lake and I saw this on my map, I would break my neck turning the boat to get back in there because that spot has just a super potential in that area. And again, main lake, no grass. So we're going to be focusing on rock, lumber, any obstruction, any cover on the structure is what we're going to be looking for. There's going to be a sweet spot on somewhere on all of that stuff. There's going to be one sweet spot that is the money shot. And that's,
are you graphing this first, or are you fishing it before you graph it?
Yeah, no, I'll graph it first.
Okay.
If it's super shallow, like the 7-foot one, the high spot that came up to 7 feet, I won't run my boat over that. I'll side scan that far away from it too, because if there's fish up there feeding, I don't want to chase them off. Sometimes when you run over them, you scatter the shallow fish, they'll regroup again, but I don't want to run them off, especially if I'm practicing. So I'll keep my distance and then take care of it that way. The deeper stuff, I found that the fish that, 18, 19, 20 plus feet, if you carefully idle over them and not be revving the motor all the time, it doesn't bother them. And then, of course, today with the 4 strokes, they barely hear the motor. I mean, they'll feel the vibration because they can feel vibrations through their lateral line, but they'll barely hear that motor. You know what I mean? So the 4 strokes today, you can probably get away with idling over them shallower, but I always play it safe, especially if I'm pre-fishing for a tournament. I got to make sure that I know exactly what's going on, so I don't want to change anything. Go ahead.
I was to say, to me, that's the spot that also looks like you could find them in 3 or 4 different locations, depending on where the bait is. So, like, if you're practicing or something, they might be up on top of it. But then when you come back at 10 in the morning and they're not actively feeding, they could be slid off of it on a different little section of it.
That's 100% true. And that's the cool part about structure fishing. As I idle off the ramp, the first school of bait fish I run into, like let's say I see them in 17 feet, 18 feet, suspending bait, then I know that my high percentage structural elements will come up to that 17-foot mark or even 15-foot. This way, the bass use that as an ambush point. So when these wads of suspending shad are doing their little eating all their plankton, moving down the bank or down the lake, they come on these high spots. Okay, the bass use those as ambush points, feeding. Basically, it's the dinner table. And so, based on current, all right, because the shad will move with the current because they're chasing plankton, they're feeding on plankton. Plankton moves with wind and current. So that'll give you a pretty good indication on if you're fishing a section of the lake that's got wind on it, it's probably going to be a little bit better for you at that point in time. Now, just if the wind doesn't blow and you find fish there, they're still going to be there. I did a crankbait show and we didn't have a lick of wind and those fish were still there. So, I mean, it's just, and you could see in the background bait fish ticking behind me on the surface, but the bass stayed on that structural element. They didn't leave it because eventually those bait fish are going to regroup and do what they do again. You know what I mean?
All right, Frank, we have a question. I'm going to go back to the Bluff section, and here's the question from Jeff. I lost fish after fish on a shaky head, 8-pound fluoro medium 6.6 spinning rod. What could I do on these Bluff fish to hook up and land them?
Go with a heavy finesse jig. You can go with a heavy finesse jig on the Bluffs like that. Or you can go with a creature bait on your shaky head instead of a finesse worm. You can go with like a spine craw. That bait's fantastic on a shaky head. Little smaller profile. The bass has a tendency to really choke on the thing. The other thing is I actually started shaky heading with a 7.5-foot bait caster. I have way more leverage, especially deep. So I'll wind down to the fish. The fish will tighten up on me. Then I get them. I don't slack set the hook like if I was flipping a bush or something. I never slack line set a hook on a shaky head because your propensity to land them is very slim. So two things could occur with what you're doing. Your rod could be too soft, too short. If you go to a 7-foot medium heavy spinning rod, you might have a better landing percentage, or a 7.4 medium heavy. And the other thing too is you got to reel down to that fish and feel his weight when you set the hook on him, and just keep reeling when you set the hook on him. The other thing you can possibly do is go to braid as a main line and put a fluorocarbon leader on it.
All right, let's go back to the humps.
One thing real quick, if you're doing the shaky head, the other thing you can do a lot of times I've found is if you lose a couple and then you start hooking them over and over on the same worm, is you're creating a little pocket in there to where you can still rig it weedless, but you're actually ripping some of that plastic out. So threading it through to where the hook point through your Texas rig shaky head and then backing it out and putting it through and backing it out a little bit creates to where it's still weedless, but you're not actually going through fresh plastic when you reel down and set the hook into them. It allows you to get a little bit better penetration.
Right. And the other trick to do sometimes too, if you're shaky heading big body bait, is put it on the side of the bait, hook it on the side of the bait.
To where it's still weedless, but you're penetrating and you're not just burying it into a hunk of plastic.
Bingo. Right on the money.
All right, back to the humps. From Lincoln, how do these fish know those mid-lake humps are there? How do they find them again as they move around the lake? How do they navigate?
Okay, so this is a good question. Fish use contour lines like we use roads. Okay, they travel through the system using the contour lines to get where they got to go. So in those pockets, all those pockets all around those good structural elements are probably good spawning pockets for them. So as they migrate to go spawn, they're using all those elements. They already know those things exist down there because they followed them in, and they'll follow them back out. So they follow them in to go spawn. They follow them in back out in the summer. And some of those spots will be good wintering areas as well. So that's how these fish do this. They don't, like a fish on the other end of the lake doesn't know those bumps are there. But the resident fish that live in that section of the lake use that stuff. That's their home. So they know that stuff exists. It's just, when are they going to use it? And that's the key, is when are they going to use it? And that's what, these are predominantly summer spots, although some of these will lend themselves to late fall, early winter, flash mob junior time, and then early spring before they get into the pockets to spawn, throw in your suspending rogues and stuff like that. So,
all right. Our good friend JD wants to know, Frank, how far out do you run your side imaging? I'm sure it varies based upon the lake depth.
Yeah, there's a rule of thumb. You put it out 3 times the distance of the depth. Most of the time I'm at 50 to 80 feet, somewhere in between there. I want detail. I want to see the detail. Sometimes I got to go out farther than that, just to get a picture, because I'm actually over deeper water. And if I want to hit a piece of cover or structure and I don't want to run it over, sometimes I might put a little more distance in there. But you got to remember, the greater your distance on side imaging, the smaller your picture is going to be. You'll be able to see stuff, but it's not going to be as detailed. So if you're really familiar with your electronics, you can get away with that, because you'll see a difference and you'll know it's something that you need to look at.
All right, last one for now, and then we're going to move on to the next maps. Interesting question from Mac. Frank, your thoughts on muskie affecting these offshore spots? I've noticed bass are not willing to eat when these big dogs are around. Thanks.
Well, no fish wants to get eaten. No fish wants to get eaten. I have encountered the exact same thing on some of the lakes. When I start catching muskies, I'm not catching bass. I have had muskies literally take a 2.5 pounder and shred it to bits when I was fighting it in. And I've had that happen numerous times, not just once. So it's eat or be eaten. It's a food chain, basically. You're fishing in a food chain. Muskies and pike are notorious for eating or slashing at a bass when you're fighting them to the boat. I would not be deterred if there were muskies on that spot when I found it. I wouldn't hesitate to go check it periodically throughout the season, because muskies also have a tendency to move. And if they're there because the bait's there, that's one thing. But if that's their pattern, then you're patterning muskies and not bass. I've done that. There's lakes where I live where I actually go muskie fishing on purpose, and I pattern them so good that I'll catch 8 or 9 in a day. And it's a blast. So, you can pattern muskies or you can pattern bass, they're all patternable. Yeah.
All right. Cool stuff. All right. We are off to Main Lake Flats. Is that correct?
I think we are on E, which is still humps and high spots.
Okay,
or did we just do that one?
We just did that one.
Well, okay. Throw it up real quick. I'm just going to reiterate. Oh, no, we just did that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we are on Main Lake Flats.
Okay.
Okay, this is going to be a little tricky. Main Lake Flats come way out offshore, and then they drop to the basin of the lake. I picked this flat out because this is not something synonymous with lakes like Gunnersville, Chickamauga. Now you'll find places like that on those lakes, but those lakes' main structure is they'll have a main river channel, a gigantic flat, and then a secondary channel inside. for the most part, this is just a big flat that comes out off the lake. So all I did on this was highlighted some real high percentage places that I would look at, like obviously where that creek channel cuts through the middle of the flat. That's a very high percentage spot. It's a structural element that does something completely different than the rest of the flat. Very high percentage area. Okay. As you can see on the top right of the screen, there's a high spot and an underwater point. That's, to me, that's a very obvious spot to look at. It flattens out real nice and it drops right off into the basin. Very, very, very high percentage, but very easy to locate. The inside turns on that little creek channel that runs in there, also very obvious to me, and very high percentage. Now, the unobvious stuff, let's go to my yellow dots. Not the yellow dots by the creek channel, but the yellow dots on the top point of the flat. Where'd you go, Mark?
Hang on. All right. Right there.
No, go to the dots. Yeah, those dots.
Right there. Yeah.
Now you're starting to get to some unobvious stuff. Clearly it drops off and clearly it peters out to the basin of the lake. That needs to be looked at because there could be brush piles out there. There could be debris. There could be rock. Anything you find out there is going to be a magnet and it's not going to get too much attention from guys. Conversely, if you go down from there to the 3 little dots by the 12-foot mark, yes,
right here.
That to me, just because there's a hook in the contour lines, I'm going to check that. I have to check that because that could be something special. Because here, I'm going to be honest with you guys. These maps are only so accurate. All maps are only so accurate. So using your eyes to spot small irregularities in these maps could lead you to hidden gems. So that's why I would look at that, just because it's different enough that maybe, just maybe, there's something going on there. If we move to the left of that, okay, to the dots I have on the left of that, that's where our flat starts to tighten up. Now we're going to get steeper break lines in there. Dollars to a donut, that's going to be starting to turn into rock because generally your steeper, sharper breaks are going to have some hard bottom to them. So that spot right there is a place that most guys would probably blow right by because it's not as obvious as that creek channel that cuts right through the center of that flat. So guys would probably blow right by all those dots that I got down there in the left side of the screen. So I would check that. Absolutely 100% for sure. Take a peek at that. That's pretty much the main lake flat stuff. So now I'm going to go into, now I want to get into flooded river systems because here your structure starts to change somewhat. So what I'm talking about here, now I know Gunnersville's got grass and Chickamauga's got grass and a lot of the TVA lakes have grass, Kentucky Lake, Barkley, etc. But I'm going to talk about only the structural elements on these lakes, but I have to use these flooded river systems to show you the secondary channel and the kind of stuff that you're going to look for here. Now, wait a second. Oh, okay, I got three maps. Okay, good. Okay, so if we go to map G, I think it's secondary creek channels.
Yep.
This is stuff that I absolutely love. If you see to the left of my yellow line, everything to the left of my yellow line is a giant flat that goes all the way across the main lake, the main river channel, Mark, all the way to the left of the screen.
Yeah.
Keep going all the way. The main river channel bumps in out there somewhere, way out there. That's not the main river channel. That's still the flat. So here, this is a true secondary channel that we're looking at on this map right now. So where my yellow line is, we have a couple things occur. We have an offshore high spot where the secondary channel splits to the right and then splits to the left. So we have a channel convergence there. Okay, the one on the right dead ends, and the one on the left keeps on meandering up the lake. That's a very, very, very high percentage area. That spot there, okay, I'm not going to talk about what it does above it because I don't have it on the map, but that spot right there, okay, you have a bluff right next to it. You have the high spot, which could be rocky. I particularly know that one is rocky. And it's an absolute money deal right there. Okay. That's the kind of stuff I look for in secondary channels. I look where they split, because where they split, generally speaking, there's going to be a bump where they split. And because there's current, or used to be a lot of current when it was a river, it's going to wash the mud off of those areas, and they're going to be hard spots. And the other thing is, any floating debris that's gradually sinks will lock up and lodge on those places. So now you have a higher potential of actually having wood on those spots as well, which only makes them better. So that's the secondary channel thing. Now, this is a tricky deal, this one. This is I call this on slide H, okay? Again, this is the rivers, flooded river system. Slide H is a straight main river channel ledge. It's just straight. So what I look for on these straight river channel ledges, I look where the high spots come up super high and where there's irregularities on that straight edge. Okay, so if you look wherever I have a yellow line, you're going to find an irregularity on that straight ledge.
Just a lot like Pickwick. Like you see this on Pickwick and stuff a lot.
100%. 100%. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the high spot on the left of all the way to the upper left of our screen. I'm not going to talk about that, although that is a decent looking place. This for now is just, I'm talking about, because this illustrates how this straight ledge has 3 high spots on it. So what that's going to do is it's going to go up and down, up and down, up and down on the top of the flat. So that's going to create current breaks, ambush points, and holding areas. Now, everywhere I have a yellow line coming in is going to be a high percentage spot on the actual break itself, where the break itself starts to go down into the main river basin. Because there's irregularities there, those are holding areas. If the fish become in a neutral mode and they want to stage down there, they're a tail push from it. A tail push. This area here, this is something you can see running down the lake, and you could see them all over the place on a lot of these river impoundments. Very good. That's very good stuff to look at right there. So now I'm going to show you the next map that I show you are my 100% absolute favorite places to fish on main river ledges. Every single place that you have a break in the ledge is the highest percentage spot you can look at. The thing that makes those the best, and I'm going to not talk about the current right now, the thing that's going to make those spots the best is the bottom composition makeup, aka rock, brush, stumps. This is where the secondary channels either cut in or come out, however you want to look at it. They either come in or come out, but there's always breaks in these ledges somewhere. And I concentrate on those breaks. It's the highest percentage spot you can absolutely fish on any river ledge. So you can see by the maps that we've gone through thus far, you can see how obvious this stuff starts to look to you guys now, because you could talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, but when you actually physically see it, it now starts to become obvious, and you can look at any map in the country and start to pick out high percentage places just by what we're talking about now. The next, and remember, this stuff is all, football jigs, Carolina rigs, crankbaits. This is traditional summer fishing stuff. The only place it gets a little different really is on the bluffs. So now the next slide we go to is J. This slide here is deeper lakes, not a lot of flats. It's more like a flooded valley. Okay.
Hold on one more second, Frank, just
Go
for
ahead.
people that really help me. Because I don't do a lot of like river channel stuff, like just where we're on the lakes, that I around here in Oklahoma, it's not more like TVA lakes.
Right.
What's really helped me is to be able to visualize it is to take like timber lines, highways, things that are dry that you can actually see that have like ditches next to them and stuff, and picturing that like what it looks like on a Navionics map. And that helps you visualize kind of what you're seeing. If you can take something that's on dry land and look at it and be like, oh, this is cool. Here's a line and here's how it dips in. Here's how it dips out. You can see like all the undulations on natural terrain above the water, and then visualize that under the water. Then when you get on the lake, it helps you kind of break down what exactly you're fishing instead of just fishing lines. You can actually start to kind of put together a picture of what's under the water. Right.
100% right. That's 100% exactly how I visualize everything. Picture like if you were deer hunting and you were on the top of a ravine and you're looking off of your tree stand at the terrain. That's exactly what I see in my head every time I look at a map. I don't look at a map and I don't see a bunch of lines. I see it in 3D. That's just how I am. I've always done that. This particular map here is exactly what we're talking about. It's not a bunch of flats. This is a deep reservoir. It's exactly like if you were in a tree stand looking out at the wilderness. That's what you're looking at on this map right here. You're looking at ravines, valleys, where the old stream beds go down into the valleys. That's what you're looking at on this particular map exactly. So if you notice on this one, it's a real serpentine channel, not really a lot of flats associated to the channel, but there's always structural elements around the creek channel. Now, I took this section of a lake because the depths aren't out of reach. Okay, most of the depths in this lake or this particular map are very fishable. You also have a lot of structural elements here. You have on the lower left, you've got your offshore high spots off of a point. You have the bluff on that point. But the thing that I like about this more than anything is the structure on the river channel. You have a bunch of high spots, a bunch of ravines, like Matt was saying, on this one. So if you see everywhere I have a yellow mark lined up, there's irregularities like mad. There's flat spots before it plummets into the main river channel. This has everything that I would be satisfied to fish all day long. On this, and this is not synonymous with a flooded river system. This is more like a flooded valley where you don't have big flats, but you have ravines and you have rolling plains and you have high spots and runoff from water and stuff formed all these particular areas. I like everywhere that channel bends is a high percentage spot, both inside and outside. On this stuff, I would definitely roll through and look for timber, standing timber, and rock on this, because I know that this would be a flooded landmass, a big lake. They can't cut all the trees down. there has to be stumps, there has to be brush, and there has to be rocks on this because that is an old riverbed. And that's why I picked that spot.
Cool stuff. Very cool stuff.
Yeah. So now, if you guys got questions, fire them up there. Let her rip, because I know you're going to have questions.
Yeah.
Well, I saw a lot of questions about Thermocline and that how does the Thermocline affect where you're looking at?
Yeah, you would never fish below the Thermocline. In fact, I don't fish very close to the Thermocline. You could find a Thermocline by cranking your sensitivity way up on your locator, and you'll get a fuzzy spot on your graph. It'll be a fuzzy spot, and that's generally where you know the Thermocline is. You have to also remember a lot of the flooded river lakes will always have current moving through them, so they're less likely to thermocline throughout the entire system. There may be areas of those systems that thermocline where the current isn't as prevalent. A lot of your deeper lakes will thermocline, especially when you see depths in 30 to 100 feet.
Will you fish juicy looking stuff like you've showed without seeing fish or bait on it, or will you always wait until you see the presence of bait and or what you can perceive as bass?
No, sometimes I get trapped and I want to fish them, and I do fish them, and sometimes I'm really pleasantly surprised, because if the bass are actually plastered to the bottom, your locator's not going to see them very well. Side imaging, you can see the white dots and you could figure they're fish. But 2D sonar, unless the fish gets off the bottom 3 to 5 inches, you're not going to have too much degree of separation there. So it's going to be a little trickier. But if it looks really good to me, I'm a creature of habit. I'm going to make some casts. It's not because I don't believe in my electronics, because I live on my electronics. But I have fished places before where I did not see fish on my electronics and caught them. And then when I get on top of the structure, all of a sudden now I can start to see fish. So what happens a lot of times is when you're moving, you may not pick up these fish, but when you're idle on top of them and you're not moving, all of a sudden you see stuff down there. Like I can tell when a fish is on the bottom just from when I ice fish. I know when there's a fish on the bottom, and I because I experience it ice fishing all the time. So now I can see that on my locator too. But when you're idling and moving, you're going to miss that sometimes because there's no separation.
All right, here's a question from Clay. He wants to know, Frank, how does water depth affect water temp? I'm in 25 feet of water and my surface temp is 89. What approximately is the temperature down at 25 feet?
I don't know. At 89 degrees, I can't tell you the exact water temperature at 25 feet deep, but I can tell you it's nowhere close to 89.
Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, heck, if you've ever swum in a lake and you dive down and you go deep, try to go as deep as you can. When we were younger, we used to do that all the time. How deep can you go? You feel the temperature change as the deeper you go. You feel it change. It's nowhere near the same. Those fish that are in 25 feet don't have a clue it's 89 degrees on the surface. They have no clue. It's just like in the spring, before the fish move up for pre-spawn, they don't know that the shallow water is 5 degrees warmer than it is in 15 feet where they're staging. They have no idea of knowing that. So, I don't think the surface temperature doesn't bother me all too much, especially when I'm fishing 25 feet or more. It doesn't bother me.
Hey, you ever seen anybody take a temperature probe and actually lower it down to 25 feet and get a reading?
Yeah, I used to do that with my aquarium thermometer.
Really?
Yeah, I used to put a weight on it and drop it down there.
Does that happen on the Great Lakes? Like, I mean, I'm going to Thousand Islands here in a couple weeks. If I'm fishing but there's going to be current. If I'm in 60 foot, is it going to be the same as the surface temp because of how much current's ripping through that thing? Is it not mix it up? No thermocline. You got a 2 mile an hour current?
Yeah, no, it's not gonna. The Great Lakes are different. That water is going to be much cooler. Most of the time, our lakes don't see 89 degrees on the Great Lakes. You're lucky, you're lucky to find that kind of temperature. Now
I just mean like but is it going to be consistent all the way through? Like on the Thousand Islands where there's the current, like it's going to be like 50 degrees down 60 foot deep.
I don't know the actual degrees. It's going to be much cooler. It's going to be much cooler that deep. But it's not going to be the same temperature from top to bottom. It's just not going to be.
All right. Next question, and we have a few more until we run out of time, and I got to get to class. Anyway, from Steven. Frank, on a natural lake like Simcoe in Ontario, it's mostly a bowl. Would you fish the mid-lake humps or the offshore drop-offs?
Lake Simcoe has tons of structure in it. You can fish you can fish all the humps that are in the center of that lake. You can fish them. There's tons of them. You will spend a lot of time fishing them because there is so many. What I would do to make it easier for me to fish is I would pick smaller structural elements, more standalone stuff. It'll help me get on the fish there faster. You're probably going to have more fish available to you on some of the heavier structure-oriented places in that lake just because it can hold more fish. But the more isolated stuff puts the fish, it gives you the easier target to catch fish. And once whatever I learn on that isolated stuff that's not in the hodgepodge, I know the lake. I studied those maps for a long time on that lake, especially. There's areas in that lake that have so much structural elements in certain areas. You can actually see how the glacier formed that place by the way all the ridge lines and all the rock formations move through that lake. So those areas are going to hold tons and tons of fish, but they're going to be harder to find because there's so much of it. So I would take an isolated area, focus on that. Once I determine a depth range, then I would go to the more popular, more populated areas with a lot more structure to them, because now I narrow down a depth range and I can poke through there in that depth range and probably find fish a little easier in those places.
All right, a couple more questions. Sean wants to know, Frank, what water temp will the fall shad spawn occur on the Great Lakes? When will the smallmouth start coming back shallow?
That's a good question, because the smallmouth, I'm not 100% sure the exact water temperature that the shad spawn on the Great Lakes. I would have to research that a little better. A lot of the fall baitfish migration occurs because the water temperatures are dropping, and things like emerald shiners, even the gizzard shad, start to migrate towards river mouths, estuary mouths, and stuff like that. I have seen late in the fall, especially when I'm guiding for steelhead, there will be billions of emerald shiners and shad in some of these river systems. So I know that the bass start to migrate when all the baits start to migrate, but they're still smallmouth and they still lie to you. I have caught them in ankle deep water in summer on the Great Lakes, as much as I have caught them in 40 plus. So I don't know what the rule of thumb is, but generally speaking, if you fish shallow stuff and you're not getting bit, those fish aren't there yet. So, it's just a tricky animal. I mean, it really is. I wish I could answer your question on the shad spawn temperature, but I don't know it.
All right. Last question here. Todd wants to know, what about the lakes in Arkansas, Washita, DeGray, when stripers and hybrids run the entire main lake chasing shad? How will they affect the bass setting up on the offshore structures?
Super question. Bass are totally opportunistic predators. If they're set up on offshore structure and the stripers and the hybrids come in there and start pounding the shad to death, those bass are going to be beneath them, eating all the crippled ones. As the crippled baitfish fall down through these schools, the ones the stripers don't pick up, the largemouth and or smallmouth, depending, then spots will go down and they will eat those cripples. It's just really difficult to get a bait through the dang stripers. I mean, they're just carnivorous, man. But they don't affect the bass location at all. What they affect is how they're feeding. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I've seen that striper thing happen many times on Texoma. Those stripers will go into a furious feeding frenzy.
Oh, yeah, it's like the water's boiling.
Oh, yeah, and even smallmouth in Texoma will be amongst the stripers along with largemouth and Kentuckies, and you just never know. There's, several stories of some of the striper guides that they'll have customers out there fishing for stripers, and they'll catch a 6-pound largemouth.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. They just change the feeding behavior, not the location. Because here, look, if the stripers are there, the bait's there. Stripers don't go anywhere there's no food ever. They're like crappie. They just swim with their mouth open and eat everything in front of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really cool. I've been on some hellacious striper bites bass fishing, and then turn my attention to the stripers because they pull like mad. So
hey, Matt's done that. Didn't you do that in like practice in the nation one time, Matt, down on Texoma? You guys got into them big time on those crankbaits.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, I remember I went back the first morning of the tournament and I made like 8 casts, and I just looked at my co-angler and I was like, we literally can't fish here.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you throw a football head out and it starts swimming off halfway down. You obviously can't throw a plug or a topwater, but you start, you throw a 10-inch worm, it starts swimming off as it falls. They're just so freaking.
Yeah, they're crazy. I did that on Murray. I had them pulling the O-rings off of my super spooks. They were so big.
Wow.
And I was throwing the super spooks on braid, so I was not playing. When I would hook them up, I would lock and load. Just hang on and just winch them in.
That is really, really good stuff. Yeah. So I got to tell you, folks, this has been one of the more educational shows that you've done. And for those people out there that were somewhat kind of uncomfortable in interpreting what you're looking at on your mapping software, you need to go back and watch the replay on what Frank is telling you about this.
What I really wanted to illustrate in today's show is how to look at a map, understand it, but more than that, be able to find high percentage places with your structure fishing. Because I've come into contact with a lot of guys that say, yeah, but what are you looking for? Yeah, but I don't understand. And so I made it real simple. The maps that I chose are probably, I got a 10 or 11 maps here, 10. And I think there's 8 different lakes on here. Just to show you that I randomly chose places. A couple of them, I chose places that I actually do fish just because I was super familiar with them. But most of them were just random lakes. I just zoomed in on a Navionics and said, "Ooh, that looks good." You know what I mean? Just to be able to give you guys an idea of make it a little bit easier for you to break down this stuff. It's one thing to know how to Carolina rig, how to throw a football jig, how to throw a crankbait. That's perfect. But it's another thing to be able to decipher what a map tells you and where you need to probably focus more attention to.
All right, last thing, we had Clark Ream on the show yesterday, and Matt brought up the situation that occurred on the Elite Series event at the Arkansas River out of Little Rock, how things were just kind of chaotic and there was some crazy stuff that took place on the water. Brian wants to know, do you remember anything from that, Frank? Is there anything that you could kind of add on to what Clark said on the show yesterday? He was the one that was interviewed by the newspaper, and he made some very harsh comments about the facilities and some of the situations that were taking place on the water. And he said, you could print that. And
you're going to kill me because I didn't see yesterday's show yet.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what he said. If you give me like a 2-minute.
When was your last year on the Elite Series? Because this happened in 2011.
I did not fish the Elites in 2011.
Okay.
I stopped fishing in 2000 and the very beginning of 2010. I stopped.
Yep.
Is that when they transferred the tournament because the river blew up? Got muddy?
No. It was just I guess it just sucked where they had to put in and take out and park and all sorts of stuff. But anyway,
there you have it, Brian. Hey,
Frank was not there. He was already back catching smallmouth.
Yeah.
The
last thing I'm gonna just say this. Look, people.
Oh my God!
If you can't trust that this guy has given gold to everybody watching and listening, come on. The dude's in an orange winterized jumpsuit there.
Well, dude,
it was flowing locks.
It was January. It was like 20-something degrees out.
That picture is a gem, man. That is awesome.
Yeah, I mean. If it had, hey, dude, my buddy Troy and I used to say, if it's got fins and eyeballs, we'll fish for it.
Oh, Frank, that is a gem. Oh, I'm sure you have some more gems, too.
Oh, there are. Trust me.
Floating around there. All right, Matt, what do we got next week?
We have Seth Feider next week. And we also have an on-location show from the Mississippi River.
That's
the outdoor brand team guys.
Tuesday night.
Neal, Mike McClellan, Paquette, a bunch of different guys. So
Sweet.
Tuesday night, right?
Yep.
All right, and Monday's show we're still working on, so just check out the website.
What day is Fighter? What day?
I don't know. I don't know.
I guess I should probably check.
I mean, you're the booker, so.
Anyway, so those are the main ones next week. So.
All right, good stuff. Can't wait to talk to some of those guys at the Writers Conference. We haven't talked to them.
Tuesday night. It's like an 8:30 p.m. show.
Yeah. We did a couple night shows. I don't know, what was it? A couple weeks ago?
Oh, no, 2 years ago from the Writers Conference we did.
Yeah, I know, but we did a couple of night shows, last week?
Yeah.
Seemed to be well taken. It's just, it makes it a little rough on the replay and stuff, but we'll knock it out because of some great people coming on that show. So looking forward to that. All right, Frank, what do you got, man? What do you got coming up? Anything?
I'm just going filming tomorrow and the weekend. I think Frankie and I are going to head up to the big lake this weekend and go catch some smallies. Yeah.
All right. By the way, folks.
Not walleyes, smallmouth.
Smallmouth. Gotcha. By the way, folks, we are patiently and trying to get to the stack of people for the locker room. So I will be in touch soon. And then hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to open this thing back up. But the locker room, that's some of the stuff that we showed today. That's some of the stuff that you get detailed one-on-one with Frank. And it has been really successful, and the feedback has been out of this world from the people that have done those. So many thanks to those.
It's been great. The people have been fantastic.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. All right, Matt, we will talk to you on Monday as you prepare. Well, you're going to be gone 3 weeks, right? 3 or 4?
3.
Hitting the road.
I promise you will never get sick of looking at a smallmouth.
I might have to roll through Cleveland and get the right prop put on.
Yeah, I don't even have them. And
What,
Todd,
is your guy?
Todd didn't get his shipment in yet. Yeah.
Not good.
If he does in the next week or two, you need to let me know. I'll roll by.
Don't worry, I
put
will.
the right one on.
All right.
I will.
Once again, folks, make sure you subscribe and give us a rating and a review over on iTunes if you're listening to the podcast. It helps us out immensely. That's it, folks. Everybody have a great weekend. We're back on Monday. Thank you, Frank. We're out of here.